Hi, welcome to another episode of the House of Bronte. In today's episode, we're going to look at a tragic event in the Bronte story. We're looking at the sunset, the death of Anne Brontë. Welcome to another episode of the House of Bronte. My name is Nick Holland. I'm a Bronte biographer and blogger. I'm the author of books including In Search of Anne Brontë and Crave the Rose, Anne Brontë at 200. So you can tell I'm a huge fan of Anne Brontë. The youngest of the six Bronte siblings, I think she's often unfairly overlooked. I think her writing, her magnificent novels, Agnes Grey, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, I think they deserve to be remembered or considered as great a book as Jane Eyre or Wuthering Heights or Villette. I think Anne Brontë was a first-class writer and a wonderful human being as well. So on this anniversary today, the 28th of May 2025, it's a sad day for me, for Bronte lovers, for Anne Brontë lovers worldwide, because today is the anniversary of the death of Anne Brontë, the 176th anniversary. So if we go back 176 years, to end of May Day in 1849, we need to go to Scarborough, to a place called Wood's Lodgings, and in that room we'd have seen Anne Brontë. We'd have seen her sister Charlotte Brontë, her elder sister Charlotte Brontë. We'd have seen their mutual friend Ellen Nussey, the three of them, in one lodging in Wood's Lodgings. And on that day, on the 28th of May, one room looking out to the sea. Now, if it's in Scarborough, Scarborough was a resort Anne Brontë loved. She'd visited it many times with the Robinson family of Thorpe Green Hall near York, a family that Anne had served for over 5 years as a governess. The Robinsons were wealthy, and it was fashionable for wealthy families of Yorkshire and of the north of England at the time to go to Scarborough, possibly Bridlington, but Scarborough was the main resort, to take the waters. It had a spa, Scarborough Spa, it's still there today, but people then went to take the waters, to walk on the beach, to breathe in the sea air, and to go to the spa, because the waters there were considered to be medicinal, healing. But above all, it was a fashionable place to go. The Robinsons would have gone to see and be seen. Anne, as the governess, would have gone with them, and she grew to love Scarborough. So when her life was coming to its close, there was one place she wanted to see one final time, Scarborough. Now, did Anne choose Scarborough because she loved the resort, she wanted to die there, she wanted to be buried in Scarborough? Maybe. Or maybe she was thinking of those medicinal healing waters. Anne was a very intelligent woman. She knew there was no hope for her. Early in 1849, Dr. Teal, a tuberculosis expert, had examined Anne, and he'd said there's no hope. She had terminal consumption, as they called it then, tuberculosis as we know it now. Anne was dying. There was no cure, and Anne was wise enough to know that. But people could live for years with this terminal consumption diagnosis. So I think Anne may have thought the healing waters wouldn't heal her fully, but they might help improve her health, give us more strength, and allow her to live a bit longer. Indeed, in a letter that Anne had written to Ellen Nussey earlier in 1849, she'd said, I'm not scared of dying, but I have plans, humble plans, but I have plans that I would have liked to do with my life. Instead, I've achieved nothing. That was basically what Anne was saying. And of course, looking at it today, we'd say Anne Brontë hasn't achieved nothing. She's achieved so much. We're still talking about her nearly 200 years later, still loving her work and thinking what a fantastic woman she was. So she didn't achieve nothing, she achieved a lot, but she didn't realise it. She wanted to live a bit longer, and I think maybe that's why she went to Scarborough. But whatever the reason, on the 24th of May 1849, Charlotte and Anne set out from Howard Parsonage, and Patrick must have known when he waved her goodbye he'd never see her again. She was in a very advanced state of consumption by that point. Very, very frail, but strong in spirit, strong in mind. So she set off. They met Ellen Nussey en route. They went to York first, stayed at the George Hotel on Coney Street. Now the George Hotel is gone. There's a bay window there of the original hotel, and quite fittingly, it's now part of a Waterstones bookstore. So that's where the Brontes stayed on this rather tragic trip. They went on from there to Scarborough and went to the spa. She insisted on doing things on her own. She was very stubborn sometimes, as Charlotte could be, and she was too weak to walk back. She collapsed walking back, and the housekeeper of Wood's lodgings had to help Anne back into the lodging. So the signs were there. Anne was drawing rapidly to the close of her life. And we get a very moving account, I think, of the end of her life from Ellen Nussey. She wrote an account later, an account of the last days of my dear friend, A.B. Anne Brontë. And it's that gives a lot of detail about Anne's last hours. And Ellen also was a major source for Elizabeth Gaskell's biography of Charlotte Brontë. She became a friend of Elizabeth Gaskell, and she told Elizabeth Gaskell about Anne's last hours. So Elizabeth Gaskell's account of this is really from Ellen Nussey as well. I think it was just too painful for Charlotte Brontë to think about. So we'll read, or I'll read, a little bit of Ellen Nussey's account of the passing of her dear friend, dear A.B., dear Anne Brontë. She said, the night of 27th May 1849, it closed with the most glorious sunset ever witnessed. The castle on the cliff stood in proud glory, gilded by the rays of the declining sun. The distant ships glittered like burnished gold. Little boats near the beach heaved on the ebbing tide, inviting occupants. The view was grand beyond description. Anne was drawn in her easy chair to the window to enjoy the scene with us. Her face became illuminated almost as much as the glorious sun she gazed upon. Little was said, for it was plain that her thoughts were driven by the imposing view before her to penetrate forwards to a region of unfading glory. Now, the glorious sunset. Was Anne looking out of that window, Wood's lodgings, at the sunset? No, she wasn't. Wood's lodgings isn't there anymore, but the spot where Wood's lodgings stood is the Grand Hotel, a huge Grand Hotel looking out over Scarborough's South Bay. Scarborough has two bays, north and south. South is the lovelier one, I think. But the Grand Hotel, a huge hotel, that's still here today. It's seen better days. When it was built in the 1870s, it was Europe's largest hotel. It's not now, but it's huge. It needs quite a lot of work doing, but it's still a great place to visit or to stay, even if you really want to get into this chapter of the Bronte story. If you've got a sea view window, as I've had there, you look out, you won't see a sunset, because the way the hotel is aligned, you actually see sunrises from that hotel. You'd need to be in the North Bay to see the sunset. So what was the glorious sunset? It's a code word, really, that Ellen Nussey used for a death, for the last hours of passing of someone's life. And we know that because in later years, Ellen Nussey wrote to Meta Gaskell, the daughter of Elizabeth Gaskell, to ask about Elizabeth Gaskell's death. And she said, how was Elizabeth Gaskell's sunset? That's what Ellen Nussey called the passing of someone's life. So she talked about a glorious end to Anne's life that's coming. So she then goes into detail about the next morning. Anne was too weak to go downstairs on her own. Ellen carried Anne downstairs. She was a lovely friend. a lovely woman, Ellen Nussey. In later years, she felt neglected by Patrick Bronte and by Charlotte's widower, Arthur Bell Nichols. They accused Ellen of taking money to sell some of Charlotte's goods, or not supporting Charlotte as she should have. That was a completely unfair accusation. Ellen did so much to preserve the Bronte story and the Bronte memories. But Patrick and Arthur just didn't know. Somebody had been feeding stories. It wasn't Ellen. I know who it was. We'll get to that in another episode of House of Bronte, possibly. It was a maid who worked for a short time in the parsonage, but it certainly wasn't Ellen. And Ellen wrote to Elizabeth Gaskell and said, tell Patrick it wasn't me selling these stories. I carried his dying daughter downstairs. So she deserved better, Ellen Nussey, really. But let's get back to this moving story. I'll try not to be a wet wipe and get too upset by it, but it is upsetting to, Bronte fans. So here we are now. Anne is downstairs. Charlotte is downstairs. Ellen is downstairs in their lodging overlooking Scarborough's South Bay. And Ellen writes, she still occupied her easy chair, looking so serene, so reliant. There was no opening for grief as yet, though all knew the separation was at hand. She clasped her hands and reverently invoked a blessing from on high, first upon her sister, then upon her friend, Ellen, then upon her friend to whom she said, "Be a sister in my stead. Give Charlotte as much of your company as you can." She then thanked each for her kindness and attention. Ere long, the restlessness of approaching death appeared, and she was borne to the sofa. On being asked if she were easier, she looked gratefully at her questioner and said, "It is not you who can give me ease, but soon all will be well through the merits of our Redeemer." Shortly after this, seeing that her sister could hardly restrain her grief, she said, "Take courage, Charlotte, take courage." Her faith never failed, and her eye never dimmed till about 2 o'clock, when she calmly, without a sigh, passed from the temporal to the eternal. So still and so hallowed were her last hours and moments. There was no thought of assistance or of dread. The doctor came and went 2 or 3 times. The hostess knew that death was near, yet so little was the house disturbed by the presence of the dying and the sorrow of those so nearly bereaved that dinner was announced as ready through the half-open door. As the living sister was closing the eyes of the dead one. That was the death of Anne Brontë. And it's beautifully remembered, isn't it? Beautifully explained by Ellen Nussey, who was a fine writer herself. We get Anne's last words, "Take courage, Charlotte." She's thinking of Charlotte in her last moments. She's thinking of Ellen, saying, "Ellen, be around Charlotte." And she's so still and so serene because she has huge faith, and that carried her through. And it drove her life, it drove her amazing books. And it's something we'll look at more fully. We'll be looking at the Brontes and faith, and Anne Brontë and her faith. She was very devoted Christian. So it's a sad day in the Bronte story, but really let's celebrate the amazing work that Anne Brontë left us. She only lived 29 years, but she packed a lot into those 29 years. We've a lot to be thankful for. So let's raise a glass. I've just got a cup of coffee in a button moon mug. But let's raise that and let's say, thank you, Anne Brontë. And thank you to you for joining me on the House of Bronte. We'll have another new video soon, maybe this weekend, and We'll have lots more after that, including a very special video. We're going to go in Tower Parsonage, a special video where we're going to be in Brussels, following the Bronte sisters' footsteps. So if you like this video, like it, subscribe, share it, tell people about it. Thank you very much.